The summer charity fair had drawn a gentle crowd to the town square. Families strolled through booths lined with handmade crafts and warm food. Children darted between balloons and cotton candy stands, and soft laughter mingled with the music from a local band. Amid the cheerful chaos, Ethan Carter stood still, detached from the moment despite the event being hosted by his own foundation. He wore the mask of a composed, successful man, charismatic, accomplished, untouchable. But beneath the tailored suit and polite smile was a man quietly haunted by grief. 5 years had passed since the accident that stole his wife and young daughter, yet the pain had only grown quieter, not lighter. Events like this, ones filled with children's laughter, always brought a heaviness to his chest, a reminder of what he'd once had and lost. Trying to escape the noise, Ethan wandered toward a quieter corner of the park, where trees cast cool shadows and the air felt less stifling. He was just about to turn back when a soft sound stopped him. It wasn't a bird or a breeze, but something more fragile, like a child stifling a sob. He turned and noticed her. A little girl, no older than 6, crouched behind the trunk of an old elm tree. Her tiny shoulders trembled as she wiped her cheeks with the hem of her faded dress. Her hair was pulled into a lopsided ponytail, and her sneakers were covered in dust. Ethan hesitated. He didn't want to frighten her, but something in the rawness of her sadness pulled him closer. He knelt down a few feet away and spoke softly. "Hey there, are you okay?" The girl didn't look up right away. She sniffled and shook her head. Then, in the smallest voice he had ever heard, she whispered, "Everyone has a dad. I only have a mom." Her words pierced straight through the barrier Ethan had spent years building. He stared at her, stunned by the innocence of her pain. For a moment, he didn't know what to say, not because he lacked sympathy, but because he understood too well. "I'm sorry," he finally said, his voice low and sincere. She looked up then, her eyes red and puffy, but filled with curiosity. "Are you a dad?" He paused. He hadn't answered that question in years. "I was," he said quietly. "A long time ago." The girl nodded solemnly, as if understanding something far beyond her years. A voice called out in the distance, "Lily?" And the girl stood quickly, wiping her eyes. A woman came running toward them, breathless and worried. Her eyes locked on the child first, then flicked to Ethan with a mix of confusion and guardedness. "Lily, I told you not to wander off," the woman scolded gently, pulling the girl into her arms. "I'm sorry, Mommy. I was just talking to him," Lily said, pointing back at Ethan. The woman turned to him again, her gaze cautious. Ethan offered a faint smile. "She's okay. Just needed a quiet moment." "Ari." "Thank you," the woman said, her voice polite but clipped. She didn't linger. As they walked away, Ethan remained crouched by the tree, watching their figures disappear into the crowd. The girl's words echoed in his mind, soft but insistent. "Everyone has a dad. I only have a mom." He stayed there a long while, the sounds of the fair fading behind him, wondering why a stranger's child had just cracked open the grief he thought he had buried for good. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling of his penthouse apartment, surrounded by polished wood, silent walls, and carefully chosen furniture that exuded success. But none of it felt like home. The city skyline blinked outside his window, but all he could see was the little girl's tear-streaked face and the weight of her words. He tried to push the moment aside, telling himself it was nothing more than a fleeting encounter. But something about her had unsettled him. No, moved him. Her sadness mirrored the emptiness he carried, and for the first time in years, he didn't want to look away. By morning, Ethan had made a quiet decision. He returned to the small town under the guise of reviewing a school project funded by his foundation. It wasn't unusual for him to check in personally on investments. At least that's how he justified it to his team. But deep down, he knew this visit had nothing to do with philanthropy. The local school principal greeted him warmly, eager to show him the new learning center his foundation had helped build. As they walked the halls, Ethan scanned the children's faces, half hoping to see her again. And then he did. Outside the classroom window, on the playground, Lily was sitting cross-legged in the sandbox, carefully sculpting a crooked castle. Ethan paused mid-conversation, his eyes drawn to the way she worked quietly, away from the noisy groups. She looked content, but still somehow apart. "She's a sweet girl," the principal said, noticing his gaze. "That's Lily Bennett. Lives with her mother, strong woman, works over at the diner. They've had a tough time, but you'd never know it. Lily's one of the brightest kids we've got." Ethan filed the name away. Lily Bennett. That afternoon, instead of returning to the city, he walked into the town's only diner. The place was small but clean, with faded photographs of local landmarks lining the walls. A woman in a plain apron moved quickly between tables, her hair tied back, her hands busy. But when she paused, Ethan recognized her immediately, the same woman from the fair. She approached his table slowly, eyebrows raised in polite suspicion. "Coffee?" "Yes, black, please." She poured it without a word, setting the cup down with practiced ease. Just as she turned to walk away, Ethan spoke. "Your daughter, she's remarkable." The woman froze slightly but didn't turn around. "Thank you. She said something to me the other day," he continued carefully. "Something I haven't been able to forget." Now she faced him, arms crossed, tired eyes focused. "What's your interest in my daughter?" There was no hostility in her voice, just a mother's wariness, shaped by experience. Ethan admired her strength. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just saw her behind that tree, and it brought back something I thought I'd buried. She reminded me of someone, my daughter." Her stance softened, just a little. "I'm sorry, did you lose her?" He nodded. "And my wife, 5 years ago." She studied him in silence, the way people do when they're trying to decide whether to trust a stranger. Finally, she offered a hand. "Ava," she said. "Ethan," he replied. He didn't tell her his last name, and she didn't ask. For the next few minutes, they stood there, just two people, connected by invisible scars, neither trying to impress the other. As she returned to work, Ethan sat quietly, sipping his coffee, listening to the clatter of dishes and the low hum of conversation. There was nothing extraordinary about the place, and yet something about it grounded him. That evening, as he walked back to his car, he paused to glance once more at the school playground where he'd seen Lily. He didn't know what he was searching for in this town, or what it meant that he'd already delayed his return to the city. But he knew one thing. He wasn't ready to leave, not yet. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling of his penthouse apartment, surrounded by polished wood, silent walls, and carefully chosen furniture that exuded success. But none of it felt like home. The city skyline blinked outside his window, but all he could see was the little girl's tear-streaked face and the weight of her words. He tried to push the moment aside, telling himself it was nothing more than a fleeting encounter. But something about her had unsettled him. No, moved him. Her sadness mirrored the emptiness he carried, and for the first time in years, he didn't want to look away. By morning, Ethan had made a quiet decision. He returned to the small town under the guise of reviewing a school project funded by his foundation. It wasn't unusual for him to check in personally on investments. At least that's how he justified it to his team. But deep down, he knew this visit had nothing to do with philanthropy. The local school principal greeted him warmly, eager to show him the new learning center his foundation had helped build. As they walked the halls, Ethan scanned the children's faces, half hoping to see her again. And then he did. Outside the classroom window on the playground, Lily was sitting cross-legged in the sandbox, carefully sculpting a crooked castle. Ethan paused mid-conversation, his eyes drawn to the way she worked quietly, away from the noisy groups. She looked content but still somehow apart. "She's a sweet girl," the principal said, noticing his gaze. "That's Lily Bennett. Lives with her mother. Strong woman, works over at the diner. They've had a tough time, but you'd never know it. Lily's one of the brightest kids we've got." Ethan filed the name away. Lily Bennett. That afternoon, instead of returning to the city, he walked into the town's only diner. The place was small but clean, with faded photographs of local landmarks lining the walls. A woman in a plain apron moved quickly between tables, her hair tied back, her hands busy. But when she paused, Ethan recognized her immediately, the same woman from the fair. She approached his table slowly, eyebrows raised in polite suspicion. "Coffee?" "Yes, black, please." She poured it without a word, setting the cup down with practiced ease. Just as she turned to walk away, Ethan spoke. "Your daughter, she's remarkable." The woman froze slightly but didn't turn around. "Thank you. She said something to me the other day," he continued carefully. "Something I haven't been able to forget." Now she faced him, arms crossed, tired eyes focused. "What's your interest in my daughter?" There was no hostility in her voice, just a mother's wariness, shaped by experience. Ethan admired her strength. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just saw her behind that tree, and it brought back something I thought I'd buried. She reminded me of someone. My daughter." Her stance softened, just a little. "I'm sorry, did you lose her?" He nodded. "And my wife, 5 years ago." She studied him in silence, the way people do when they're trying to decide whether to trust a stranger. Finally, she offered a hand. "Ava," she said. "Ethan," he replied. He didn't tell her his last name, and she didn't ask. For the next few minutes, they stood there. Just two people, connected by invisible scars, neither trying to impress the other. As she returned to work, Ethan sat quietly, sipping his coffee, listening to the clatter of dishes and the low hum of conversation. There was nothing extraordinary about the place, and yet something about it grounded him. That evening, as he walked back to his car, he paused to glance once more at the school playground where he'd seen Lily. He didn't know what he was searching for in this town, or what it meant that he'd already delayed his return to the city. But he knew one thing: he wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. A week passed, then two. Ethan became a familiar face in town, not just at the diner but at the school board meetings, the library renovation project, even the Saturday market. People began to greet him with cautious friendliness, still unsure why a man like him would linger here, but slowly growing used to his presence. He kept his distance from Ava outside the diner, never overstepping, never pushing. But there were moments, brief, flickering moments, when their eyes met and something unspoken passed between them. Grief recognized grief. Strength acknowledged strength. Neither of them said it aloud, but they both felt it, the beginning of something neither had dared hope for. One evening the diner was slow. Only a few customers lingered over pie and coffee. Lily had fallen asleep in the back booth with a storybook tucked under her arm. Ethan stood to leave, but Ava stopped him. "You've been coming here for almost a month," she said, her voice quiet. He looked at her, waiting. She wiped her hands on a towel, then sat across from him at his booth. "And I don't know anything about you." "Not really." Ethan stirred his coffee, thinking. "What do you want to know?" "Why you're here," she said simply. "Really?" He considered lying, saying he was taking time off, scouting projects, clearing his mind. But there was something in her eyes, something honest, raw, that demanded truth. "I had a wife," he began, "and a daughter. Her name was Sophie. She was 6, just like Lily." Ava's gaze softened, but she said nothing. "We were driving back from a family weekend in the mountains. A drunk driver crossed into our lane. He paused. I survived. They didn't. Silence fell between them, heavy but sacred. I blamed myself for a long time, he continued, for taking that road, for being behind the wheel, for being the one who walked away. Ava reached for her coffee, her fingers trembling slightly. I know that kind of guilt, she murmured. It doesn't fade. It just settles in the bones. Ethan looked at her. Lily's father? She gave a short, bitter laugh. He left before she was born, said he wasn't ready to be a dad. I begged him to stay. For her. He didn't even look back. He didn't speak. He knew there were no words that could mend that kind of abandonment. I spent years trying to prove I didn't need him, she said. Worked 3 jobs. Moved to this town when Lily was 2. Thought if I just stayed busy, stayed strong, she'd never notice what was missing. Ethan thought of Lily's whisper behind the tree. Everyone has a dad. I only have a mom. She noticed, he said quietly. Ava nodded, eyes glassy. I know. They sat together in the quiet, the clink of cutlery and soft murmurs from the few remaining customers filling the space around them. For once, neither of them felt the need to pretend they were fine. You know, Ava said after a long pause, most men in your position don't spend their days fixing school roofs or buying books for kids they don't know. Ethan smiled faintly. I'm not most men. No, she agreed. You're not. He stood then, but his voice was gentle. If it ever feels like I'm crossing a line, tell me. I don't want to disrupt your life. Ava looked up at him, something unreadable in her gaze. You haven't disrupted it, Ethan. He met her eyes. No? You've reminded me that not all good things disappear. For the first time in a long while, Ethan left the diner not just feeling understood, but quietly hopeful. And in the booth behind him, Lily stirred in her sleep and whispered, Mr. E, before turning her head to the window and smiling. The following days settled into a quiet rhythm. Ethan began each morning with a walk into town, his steps slower, more deliberate than when he first arrived. He stopped by the diner, not just for coffee, but to see the way Lily's eyes lit up when she spotted him through the window, or to share a brief conversation with Ava while she refilled his cup. He still kept his distance, but not in a way that felt cold. It was a careful kind of closeness, the kind earned inch by inch. Ava had been alone for too long to open her life to just anyone, especially a man who came from a world so far from her own. But Ethan didn't try to impress her. He didn't offer handouts. Instead, he showed up, in small, quiet ways. One evening, a pipe burst in the school's reading room. Word spread fast, and Ava showed up with towels, while Ethan arrived with tools. Together, they worked side by side, knee-deep in water, trying to salvage what they could before the books were ruined. Ava laughed when Ethan slipped and nearly fell, catching himself on a desk with a grunt. I thought rich men didn't get their hands dirty, she teased. Ethan wiped his wet hands on his jeans. We do when the right people are watching. She didn't answer right away, but the glance she gave him wasn't dismissive. It lingered, and it stayed with Ethan long after they finished the job. By now, the townspeople had begun to talk. The man who once felt like a stranger was now a regular at school events, grocery stores, and late-night community meetings. Whispers followed him. Speculations about who he really was, why he hadn't left yet, and what he wanted with a single mother and her daughter. Some were skeptical, some were hopeful. But Ava, for her part, stayed quiet. One Friday afternoon, as the golden light of dusk spilled over the town square, Lily tugged Ethan's sleeve outside the diner. Will you come to my school play next week? She asked. I'm the moon. Ethan knelt to meet her eyes. The moon? That's a big role. I have to shine, she said earnestly. And not mess up my line. He smiled. I wouldn't miss it for the world. That evening, after Lily had gone to bed in the back of the diner, Ava leaned on the counter, arms folded, watching Ethan as he lingered over his last cup of coffee. "She's growing attached," she said. Her voice was even, but her eyes held something cautious beneath the surface. "I know," Ethan said, "and I can't let her get hurt." He looked at her, understanding the weight behind her words. "Neither can I." Silence settled between them for a moment before Ava spoke again, softer now. "She's never had someone show up like this. She used to watch the other kids with their dads and pretend she didn't care. But when you're around, she smiles different." Ethan's voice was low. "So do you." That stunned her for a moment. Then she lowered her gaze, her fingers tracing a slow pattern across the countertop. "I don't know what this is," she said honestly. "Me either," he replied. "But I don't want to walk away from it." She looked up. "Not yet." He shook his head. "Not if I don't have to." Ava didn't answer, but she didn't turn away either. She simply nodded, the smallest of gestures, yet one that held more meaning than any grand declaration. That night, as Ethan walked home, the streets quiet and cool, he realized something had shifted, not just between him and Ava, but within himself. For the first time in years, he wasn't waiting for the past to let go of him. He was learning slowly to reach for something new. And this time, it wasn't built on guilt or grief. It was built on showing up, on quiet trust, and on the hope that maybe, just maybe, there was still a place in the world where he could belong. The night of the school play arrived, and the auditorium buzzed with nervous excitement. Rows of folding chairs filled the room as parents shuffled in, holding cameras and flowers. Children peeked from behind the curtain, their voices hushed with last-minute reminders and bubbling anticipation. Ethan slipped into a seat near the middle row, dressed simply, his hands folded in his lap. He hadn't attended anything like this in years, not since the last dance recital Sophie had performed in. The memory flickered in his mind as the lights dimmed, but tonight the sorrow didn't crush him. It sat beside him, quietly, without stealing his breath. The curtain rose. Lily stood to the side of the stage, her silver costume catching the light. She looked small up there, a single figure on a crowded stage. But when her cue came, she stepped forward and said her line clearly. "I am the moon, lighting your way when the sun says goodnight." There was a beat of silence, and then applause filled the room. Ethan clapped hard, smiling wide, catching her eyes just long enough for her to spot him in the crowd. She beamed, waving shyly before retreating behind the painted cardboard stars. The play went on, but for Ethan, that moment had already made the night unforgettable. Afterward, parents milled around the hallway, congratulating their children, taking photos, chatting in excited clusters. Lily ran into Ethan's arms, her cheeks flushed, her glitter beginning to flake off. "Did I do okay?" she asked breathlessly. "You lit up the whole room," he said, "just like the real moon." Ava joined them moments later carrying Lily's coat. Her expression was soft, grateful. "She's been practicing that line for weeks. She was nervous you wouldn't come." Ethan looked at her, serious. "I told her I'd be here." Ava nodded, folding the coat over her arm. "You always do what you say, don't you?" "I try." They walked together through the cool evening air, Lily holding Ethan's hand with one of hers and gripping her mother's with the other. As they neared the diner, Lily stopped suddenly. "Mr. E, do you have kids?" Ethan hesitated. The question caught him, even though he knew it might come. "I did," he said softly. "A little girl." "Where is she now?" He crouched to her level. "She's not here anymore, but I still think about her every day." Lily reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder in a gesture far too tender for a child. "Maybe she's the moon too, watching over you." Ethan swallowed hard. "Maybe she is." Ava stood behind them, silent, her hand gently pressed to her mouth. She had never seen Ethan vulnerable like this, Yet it didn't make him smaller. It made him real. Later that night, Ethan stayed for dinner at the diner. They ate after closing, just the three of them, with Lily curled up in a booth finishing her dessert, while Ava and Ethan lingered over coffee. The conversation was easy, filled with stories from childhood, quiet laughter, and stretches of silence that felt safe. When he finally rose to leave, Lily surprised him by running up and throwing her arms around his waist. "Thank you for coming," she said. He rested a hand on her back. "Thank you for inviting me." She looked up. "Will you come again next time, when we do another play?" He nodded. "Of course." "Promise?" "I promise." And in that promise, something shifted. Not an obligation, not a performance, but the real thing, a seed of belonging, of something growing, tender and fragile, yet grounded in something honest. As Ethan stepped out into the night, he realized the weight he carried had changed. Grief was still there, but it wasn't dragging him down anymore. Now it walked beside hope, and hope was beginning to lead. As the days passed, the quiet rhythm of the small town continued, but beneath the surface, whispers had begun to stir. Ethan's presence had become impossible to ignore. The mysterious man who once sat quietly in the diner now helped coach school fundraisers, read books at the library's children's hour, and fixed leaky pipes in the community center. And most notably, he was seen often with Ava and Lily. Some called it sweet, others called it suspicious. "He's a millionaire," they said. "Why would a man like that stay here? Must be running from something. I hear he's involved with that waitress." The gossip wasn't malicious at first, just idle curiosity in a town that hadn't seen anything unexpected in years. But slowly the curiosity sharpened into skepticism. Ava heard it at the grocery store, in the school hallway, even inside the diner. "Careful with men like that," one regular warned. "They come and go. You're the one who'll have to clean up the mess." She brushed it off with a polite smile, but the words stung. Ava had fought so hard to protect her life with Lily, built every inch of it on her own. She couldn't afford another mistake, especially not one that would break Lily's heart. That evening, after the diner closed, she sat across from Ethan in the back booth. They hadn't spoken much that day, both of them caught in their thoughts. Now the silence between them was heavier than usual. "They're talking," Ava said, breaking it. Ethan glanced up. "Who?" "Everyone, about you, about us, about why you're still here." He leaned back slightly. "And what do you think?" She didn't answer right away. I'm afraid." He nodded, waiting. "I've spent so many years making sure Lily had stability, no surprises. I can't let anything touch that. Not even you." "I understand." Ava looked at him, searching his face for doubt or defensiveness, but found neither, only something calm, steady. "I've had people walk out before," she said. "I learned to expect it." Ethan leaned forward now, his voice low. "I'm not here to fix your life, Ava, and I'm not here to disrupt it either. I'm here because, for the first time in years, I feel something when I'm with you and Lily. Something I thought I'd lost for good." She blinked, caught off guard by the honesty in his voice. "I'm not asking for anything," he added, "but I'm not going to pretend I don't care. About her, about you." A long silence followed. "You said once you were waiting to feel like life meant something again," Ava said finally. "I did. And now? I think I've found it." She sat very still, her hand resting near her empty coffee mug. Then quietly she whispered, "I want to believe that." Just as Ethan opened his mouth to respond, the front door burst open. A man stood there, damp from the rain, his eyes darting across the diner before landing on Ava. "Well, well," he said, his voice tinged with smugness. "Thought I'd find you here." Ava stood quickly, her face going pale. "What are you doing here, Sean?" The man, taller than Ethan with a sharp jaw and colder eyes, smirked. "You've been hard to track down, but I thought it was time I met my daughter." Ethan stood slowly, He didn't know who Sean was, but the way Ava was frozen said enough. "You need to leave," Ava said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere," Sean replied, stepping closer. "She's mine too. You gave that up a long time ago." Ethan stepped between them, calm but unflinching. "You heard her. Leave." Sean laughed under his breath. "And who are you? Her new bodyguard?" "No," Ethan said, "but I won't let you threaten her." Sean's eyes flicked between them, calculating. Then with a muttered curse, he backed off. "This isn't over," he warned before turning and disappearing into the night. As the door swung closed, the diner fell into silence again. Ava was trembling, her breath shallow. Ethan approached gently. "Are you all right?" She nodded, but her eyes were wet. "He's Lily's biological father. He abandoned us. I thought he was gone for good." Ethan didn't say anything. He simply stood there, offering his presence. Not a promise, not a solution, just something solid. Ava looked at him, and for the first time her fear turned to something else, trust. And in that moment they both understood that the road ahead wouldn't be smooth, but neither of them would be walking it alone. The next morning brought no peace. Ava awoke early, her mind still spinning from the storm Sean's return had stirred. She watched Lily sleep for a moment, curled beneath her blanket, peaceful and unaware. How long would that peace last? How much could a child take before the world started to feel unsafe? She stepped into the kitchen, poured a cup of coffee with shaking hands, and sat at the small table where so many of her decisions had been made. This one weighed heavier than most. By noon, the entire town knew. Sean Bennett was back, and claiming he wanted to be part of Lily's life. The news spread like wildfire. Some said he had rights. Others questioned his timing. But Ava knew one thing. He hadn't come for Lily. He'd come for control, for disruption. That's what he'd always been good at. He had found out about Ethan. That much was clear. She suspected jealousy had brought him back, resentment at seeing someone else step into a role he'd thrown away. Maybe he saw dollar signs. Maybe he just hated to be replaced. Ethan met her outside the diner later that day. He looked tired too, but not shaken. "I spoke with someone," he said. "An attorney I trust, just in case you need legal help." Ava bristled. "I don't need your money, Ethan." "I'm not offering money," he said gently. "I'm offering support." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I can't afford to let him take her." "Then he won't. I don't know the law. I don't know what rights he still has. I raised her alone. I've done everything right. But what if that's not enough?" Ethan looked at her, his voice low and steady. "You are enough, Ava. You always have been." That night, Sean showed up again, this time with a lawyer's letter in hand. Ava didn't let him inside. She took the paper silently and closed the door without a word. Inside, she sat at the kitchen table again, reading the legal jargon that hinted at possible visitation rights and custody petitions. Lily peeked from the hallway. "Who was that, Mommy?" Ava folded the letter, forcing a calm smile. "Just someone from the past, sweetheart. Nothing you need to worry about." But Ava was worried. She spent the next 2 days gathering documents, meeting with a local attorney, and bracing herself for a fight she had never wanted. Through it all, Ethan stayed close, never pushing, never assuming, but always there. He watched Lily when Ava had meetings. He picked her up from school and brought her milkshakes. He asked for nothing in return, and slowly the town began to see him differently. They saw the way Lily ran to him at dismissal time, the way Ava's shoulders relaxed when he entered the diner, the way his presence didn't just support their lives, it added to them. Not as a savior, but as someone choosing to stay. One evening, after another meeting with the lawyer, Ava returned home to find Ethan and Lily sitting under the old oak tree in the yard. She was reading to him, stumbling through the words, pausing to ask questions, and giggling when she mispronounced galaxy. Ethan looked up and smiled. We're studying astronomy. Lily nodded seriously. I want to be an astronaut, or a veterinarian, or maybe both. Ava managed to laugh, despite the exhaustion pressing down on her. Why not both? Lily beamed. Mr. E says I can be anything I want. After Lily went to bed, Ava and Ethan sat outside under the stars. She doesn't know what's coming, Ava whispered, and I don't want her to. She doesn't have to, Ethan said. She just needs to know she's safe. Ava turned to him, her voice wavering. I can't lose her. You won't. She searched his face. Why are you still here, Ethan? This isn't your fight. It is now. He reached into his pocket and handed her a folded envelope. She opened it slowly. Legal documents, notarized, prepared. Ethan had officially offered to testify in court on her behalf, as a character witness, as someone who had been present in Lily's life for months, someone who had seen Ava's devotion firsthand. I didn't ask for this, she said, tears rising in her eyes. I know, he replied softly. That's why it means something. Ava looked down at the papers, then back at Ethan. For the first time since Sean returned, she didn't feel alone, and in that quiet, vulnerable night, something between them solidified, not through grand gestures or promises, but through the simple, steady truth. Ethan had chosen them, not out of pity, not for show, but because he wanted to. The courthouse smelled of old wood and nerves. Ava sat stiffly on the bench outside the family courtroom, her fingers laced tightly in her lap. Across from her, Sean leaned casually against the wall, arms crossed, a smug grin playing on his lips. He hadn't changed much. Same sharp jaw, same slick charm, but there was something colder now in his eyes. A quiet cruelty that made her skin crawl. Lily didn't know they were here. Ava had arranged for her neighbor to watch her for the day. The last thing she wanted was for her daughter to witness this. Another battle, another room full of strangers deciding her fate. Ethan arrived just minutes before the hearing. He wore a simple navy suit, clean-shaven, a quiet steadiness in his step. He walked straight to Ava, knelt beside her, and placed his hand gently over hers. You don't have to say anything you're not ready for, he said quietly, but I'll be right there, every second. Ava nodded. Words felt too heavy. Inside, the hearing began. The judge, a tired woman with sharp eyes, glanced over the file before asking Sean to state his case. He rose smoothly, painting a picture of regret and transformation. He spoke of missed chances, of a father's right, and how children deserve both parents. Ava listened in silence, fury simmering beneath her ribs. He never once said Lily's name, never described her laugh, her favorite bedtime story, her love for stars or stray animals. To him, she was just a concept, a tool. Then the judge turned to Ava. Her lawyer guided her forward. Ava stood, hands trembling slightly as she recounted the years alone. The sacrifices, the milestones Sean had missed, the first steps, the fevers, the birthday wishes he never returned. She didn't cry. She spoke plainly, steadily, with quiet heartbreak threaded into each word. And then Ethan was called. He walked to the front and looked directly at the judge, not with the rehearsed confidence of a man used to boardrooms, but with the sincerity of someone who had found something worth fighting for. I'm not Lily's father, he began, but I've watched Ava raise her with more patience and love than most people can fathom. Lily isn't missing a father. She's thriving because of the mother she has. I didn't come into their lives to replace anyone. I came because I saw something rare, something worth staying for. The judge asked one question. Do you consider yourself part of this child's life? Yes, Ethan said without hesitation. She considers me part of hers. The room was silent. Later that afternoon, after hours of legal arguments and testimonies, the judge called for a recess before rendering her decision. Ava and Ethan stepped outside into the fading light. The sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps. She leaned into his shoulder, the tension slowly bleeding from her bones. "I can't believe we did that," she murmured. "You did that," he said. "I just stood beside you." Suddenly, a car door slammed. They turned. Sean stood by his car, red-faced, gripping the handle hard. He stared at them for a long second, then shook his head with disgust. "This isn't over," he muttered before driving off. But Ava no longer flinched at his threats. That night, she returned home to find Lily waiting by the window. "Where were you, Mommy?" Lily asked, running into her arms. Ava crouched down and held her tightly. "Just taking care of something. Grown-up stuff." "Were you sad?" "Maybe a little, but I'm okay now." Lily leaned in, whispering, "You smell like outside and coffee." Ava laughed, burying her face in her daughter's hair. "And you smell like peanut butter and crayons." Later, Ethan joined them for dinner. They ate spaghetti at the small kitchen table, laughing at Lily's stories about school. For the first time in weeks, the house felt warm again, steady, like the eye of a storm had finally passed. Before bed, Lily handed Ethan a drawing, stick figures beneath a starry sky. "This is me, that's Mommy, and that's you," she explained. "We're looking at constellations." Ethan smiled. "What's that big one up there?" "It's our galaxy," she said proudly. "It's called home." Ava's breath caught in her throat. As Lily drifted off to sleep, Ava stood by the window, watching the moon rise. Ethan came beside her, silent for a moment. "She's stronger than both of us," he said. Ava nodded. "And somehow she saved me too." In that quiet moment, under a sky filled with stars, Ava realized something she hadn't dared to hope for in a long time. They were no longer surviving. They were becoming a family. The ruling came on a Thursday morning. Ava barely slept the night before, her mind looping through every possible outcome, every word spoken in court, every glance the judge had exchanged with their lawyers. Ethan brewed coffee at dawn, placing a steaming cup on the windowsill beside her, then silently returned to making breakfast for Lily. When the phone rang, her heart stopped. It was her lawyer. A brief pause, a breath, and then the words, "The court denied Sean's petition for custody." Ava didn't cry. She sank slowly into the couch, gripping the edge of a cushion. Relief came not as a burst, but like the tide, gradual, undeniable, powerful. The court had acknowledged what she always knew. Biology alone doesn't make a father. When she told Ethan, he didn't celebrate, didn't grin or exhale with triumph. He just looked at her with something steady and warm in his eyes, then reached for her hand. "I'm proud of you," he said, "not for winning, for surviving." That evening, Ava picked Lily up from school herself. The sun was dipping low, casting golden shadows across the playground. Lily ran toward her, with arms open wide, backpack bouncing, curls catching the light. "Mommy!" she squealed. "You came!" Ava scooped her up and spun her gently in the air. "Of course I did." "Can we get ice cream?" Lily asked. Ava paused. "You know what? Yes. Let's get 2 scoops." At the ice cream parlor, Lily sat on Ethan's lap, smearing chocolate across her cheeks as she told him about her spelling test. Ethan wiped her face with a napkin, pretending to gag dramatically as she licked the melted drops off her wrist. Ava watched them from across the table, her heart full in a way that felt foreign and beautiful. She no longer felt like a woman constantly repairing broken parts. She was rebuilding something new. That night, while Lily colored on the living room floor, Ethan approached Ava with a small, square envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "I wasn't sure when to give it to you," he said, "but now feels right." Inside was a hand-drawn invitation, in Lily's handwriting, uneven and sweet. "Please come to our star party, just us, under the sky. Saturday." Ava looked up. "You helped her with this?" She had the idea. I just folded the paper. Saturday came with a breeze that smelled of honeysuckle and hope. They drove to a quiet hill just outside the city where the skyline faded into meadows. A picnic blanket, sandwiches, a thermos of hot cocoa. Lily had packed stuffed animals and 2 books about the moon. They lay on their backs as the stars came out one by one. Lily whispered, "Ethan, which star are you?" He pointed. "That one. The steady one." Ava laughed. "That's Polaris, the North Star." "So, you help people find their way?" Lily asked seriously. Ethan turned to her. "Sometimes, but you and your mom already know where you're going. I'm just lucky you let me come along." Ava's chest ached with emotion. She reached over and took his hand. In that quiet field under the constellation of their own making, Ava whispered something she hadn't said to anyone in years. "Thank you for loving her." Ethan didn't look away from the stars. "It's the easiest thing I've ever done." She rested her head on his shoulder. Lily curled up on her other side. And for the first time in a long, long time, Ava believed in something again. Not just safety or peace, but love. Not the kind born of fairy tales or grand gestures, but the kind built over late-night fevers, bedtime stories, whispered dreams under trees. Love that chose them. Love that stayed. The peace Ava had found felt fragile, like porcelain, beautiful but delicate. But life, as always, found a way to test it. One cloudy afternoon, a letter arrived. Not an email, not a text. An actual letter, stamped and folded, its edges slightly worn from travel. Ava saw the return address and froze. It was from her mother. She hadn't spoken to her in years. Not since Ava left home pregnant, alone and afraid. Her mother had been cold, distant, ashamed of Ava's choices, disappointed in the chaos she believed Ava brought upon herself. They parted with silence and pain. Ava sat at the kitchen table, letter unopened, fingers trembling slightly. Ethan came in with groceries, noticed the stillness in her face, and set the bags down quietly. "You okay?" he asked. She slid the envelope toward him without a word. He looked at it, then looked at her. "Do you want me to be here when you read it?" She nodded. With a deep breath, she tore the seal and unfolded the page. The handwriting was familiar, neat, cautious. "Ava, if this reaches you, it means I've found the courage I lacked before. I was wrong about you, about Lily. I thought I was protecting you by pushing you away, but I see now that I was protecting myself from my own fears, my own shame. I've missed so much, and I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that I think of you every day. I think of that little girl who used to dance barefoot in the kitchen and laugh like the world couldn't touch her. You've always had more strength than I ever did. If there's room in your life, I'd like to meet my granddaughter. Love." Mom Ava read it twice, then a third time. She didn't cry, but something loosened deep inside her. An old knot she hadn't realized was still there. Ethan sat across from her, waiting. "I don't know what to feel," she whispered. "You don't have to decide anything now," he said. "But it's okay to feel whatever you do, even if it's everything at once." That night she watched Lily sleeping, curled around her stuffed bunny, breath soft, safe, whole. Ava realized something. She had worked so hard to build a new life, to shelter her daughter from pain, that she had started sealing off parts of her own heart, parts that still hurt, parts that still remembered. But maybe healing didn't mean forgetting. Maybe it meant letting light into the places she'd kept locked away. The next morning, she sat down at the kitchen table again, this time with a pen and a blank sheet of paper. "Mom, I'm not ready to forgive everything, but I am ready to start something new. If you want to meet Lily, you can. Just know that she is loved and safe and brilliant, and she will not be made to feel the things I did. Maybe we both get a second chance." Ava. She sealed the envelope and handed it to Ethan without a word. He nodded, understanding without asking questions. Later that day, Ava picked Lily up from school. As they walked past the playground, Lily stopped at the same tree where she used to sit alone. "Do you remember the day we met?" Ava asked softly. Lily smiled. "I was crying. You found me." Ava knelt beside her. "You saved me too, you know." Lily blinked. "I did." Ava pulled her close. "Yes, you showed me how to love again." And with Lily's small hand in hers, they walked forward toward whatever came next. The summer came early that year. Warmth arrived not just in the air, but in the small, quiet moments that filled the home. Morning pancakes, laughter at bedtime, soft music drifting through open windows. Life had found its rhythm, tender and steady, like the calm after a storm that had lasted far too long. Ava stood by the window one afternoon, watching Lily chase butterflies in the garden. Her hair glowed in the sun, her giggles a melody Ava never tired of hearing. Ethan came up behind her, wrapping his arms gently around her waist. There was something unspoken between them, a kind of understanding that didn't need to be said anymore. Love for them had been built slowly, brick by brick, through patience, sacrifice, and healing. "I've been thinking," he said quietly, "about adoption, about becoming Lily's father legally, if you're okay with that." Ava turned to look at him. "You already are in every way that matters." He smiled, his eyes soft. "Still, I want her to know I chose her, not just because I love you, but because I love her. She deserves that." Her heart swelled. In all the pain she had once known, she never imagined life could offer something this whole. They talked to Lily that night. They explained it in gentle words, letting her ask questions, letting her feel safe. When they asked if she wanted Ethan to be her real dad, not just in spirit but on paper, she nodded with that familiar quiet strength Ava had always admired. "I already call him Daddy," Lily said simply. "He makes me feel like I have a real family." The paperwork took weeks, but the day it was finalized, they celebrated with Lily's favorite dinner, mac and cheese, with chocolate cake for dessert. She drew a crayon picture that night of the three of them holding hands beneath a big yellow sun. She labeled it, "My Forever Family." A few days later, Ava's mother arrived for a visit. It wasn't easy. The conversation was hesitant, laced with old tension and new humility. But when her mother saw Lily for the first time, something broke open in her face. She knelt down and opened her arms, unsure. Lily looked to Ava, who gave a small nod. Then the little girl ran forward, and the past began to shift. Healing wasn't quick. It was never meant to be. But forgiveness, Ava learned, wasn't about erasing what had happened. It was about no longer letting it control the present. One night long after Lily had gone to sleep, Ava sat on the porch with Ethan beside her. The stars were out, clear and endless. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" she asked. He reached for her hand. "Every day." Ava closed her eyes, breathed in the night air. She remembered the first time she saw Lily behind that tree, small, fragile, crying softly into her hands. She remembered her own fear, the aching loneliness she had carried for so long, and now it felt like a story she had lived in another life, one that had led her here. She turned to Ethan. "We didn't just save her," she whispered. "She saved us." He kissed her forehead. "Then maybe that's what family really is. Not something you're born into. Something you choose. Something you fight for." And in that quiet space beneath the stars, their story wasn't about loss anymore. It was about love, about the home they had built, not just with walls and a roof, but with second chances, open hearts, and the courage to begin again. End.